This is the Mobile Tech Podcast, brought to you by worldpodcasts.com. Now here's your host, Tech Girl, Miriam Joie.
Brought to you by Mint Mobile. Stay tuned for a special offer at the end of the show. Hi, and welcome to the Mobile Tech Podcast. I'm your host, Miriam Joie, and today is Thursday, April 13th, 2023. And I have the amazing, the excellent Dr. Rita El-Khoury here with me today. Hi, Rita. How are you?
Hi, Miriam. I'm fine. Doing fine in this cloudy Paris weather.
Well, I wouldn't have guessed looking at your screen right now, because it seems like you have a good amount of light coming in. So you're kind of cheating there if it's gray outside. I wouldn't know.
That's a good thing, actually. Even though this is sort of like a basement apartment, it somehow gets some decent light in, and I can take some good photos, which is cool.
Yeah, it looks like you have enough light for good photos. Yeah. I'm impressed. So you saw the news. There's not too much. I mean, there's a few big phone announcements, but they're more like teasers, like the Xiaomi 13 Ultra, but the rest of it is more like leaks and rumors as usual. But the first thing I want to talk with you about is AI, or more specifically, generative AI, whatever, the whole shebang that everybody's going on about. Because you wrote an article for Android Authority, right? And what are your thoughts on this Chat GPT stuff? Yeah, go.
It's both exciting and very frightening at the same time. Every single day when I open my Twitter feed, even though I'm trying as much as possible not to check Twitter as frequently as I used to, so every single day when I open my Twitter feed, there are dozens and dozens of threads by these new AI overexcited users that are sharing, the latest thing, the latest prompt you can use in ChatGPT or in Midjourney, or the latest thing you can do to integrate something new with Notion, and all these kinds of cool and very exciting and very interesting ways of making the computer do things for you that we thought, or up until this point, it wasn't capable. You had to dictate every single step of the process, and now somehow it can figure it out on its own. And it's super exciting because I can see the possibilities, but it's also extremely overwhelming. Like, I feel I cannot catch up at some point, especially because of all this, deluge of threads on Twitter. I feel like I have to dedicate my entire day to just catch up to everything that's possible. And I, in my article, I likened it a little bit to what my parents would have felt when, the computers and the phones started coming on the market, except that they had years to, sort of try to understand what these things were capable of. And the first versions of a computer and a phone, they didn't do much, and it took a year to reiterate and another year to, for new features to come along. Whereas here, it's like, tick, 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 like it's a weekly, daily, even hourly at some point basis. And it's, do we dedicate our entire lives to just, do we stop everything we're doing for a month and try to catch up with this stuff? Do we just keep on doing what we're doing and try to integrate it, and then sort of be on the margin of, everyone who's embraced it fully? I still haven't figured it out, and I really need to at some point very soon.
I feel like I'm on the B part. Like, I'm on the fringe of it, but I'm using it and I'm benefiting from it. And look, I think as a journalist who loves tech, who understands software, I worked in video games for years, as you know, I kind of understand some of the basics behind what's going on. Mm. Do I understand in any way how it's going to impact society and culture going forward? No, but to me, back in 1993, I was in university. I'm that old. And, I was presented with a web browser, Mosaic, running on a Silicon Graphics SGI in our computer lab in my engineering school. And at the time, I was very tech savvy as well, but I was very computer literate and savvy for my time. I had internet access starting in 1988 in college. I had an email address, like not a local like AOL or something. I had a real like edu email address, right? And I was starting using Unix computers before Linux existed on the Sun microsystems computers, like these workstations in the late 80s. And I had an entire lab of Macs and an entire lab of IBM PS2s, an entire lab of Silicon Graphics computers available to me because I worked, my part-time job when I was in university in Canada was to manage the labs at night. So I learned a lot ad hoc, right? Okay. On site, I played with stuff. And I remember the first time one of my friends said, check out this application for the Silicon Graphics. It's this thing called a web browser. And I saw it and I immediately knew, Rita, this would change the world. But I didn't know how. And it was the same feeling I have today with AI. This is a huge deal. This is an inflection point. It's going to change the world. I don't know how, but I'm going to adopt it. Now, did I learn HTML right away? No. Did I use it? Yes. I didn't understand the nitty gritty, but I understand enough that I needed to be at least peripheral to it. And I have friends who became web developers very quickly. And, I have other friends who still work as, in web design today and are very good at what they do. But I feel like this tool is the same way. Like as a journalist, I don't think I can dedicate any amount of time to it other than maybe on this podcast here and there, because it's part of the entire umbrella of technologies, right? Yeah. And I'm not a specialist on that for sure, but at least I keep an eye on it. And I think that's the best we can do. I don't think we can try to fully understand this. And certainly we can't predict what's going to happen with it, right? There's a lot of repercussions here. Like it's really scary. When I was a student in 93, that was like the sky was the limit. I was an optimist. Today, I've lived through all these terrible things that, we've all experienced. I think the world is a much different place than then. And so, COVID, there's always been a war, so that wasn't new. But the thing is, it's a different world. I think there's a lot of, at least I'm aware of now, a lot more of the social issues around what's happening in the world. And so that's certainly come into play in my experience with AI and what I think. It can be very scary, and I believe like every tool can be used for really terrible things, and it will be. Don't doubt it. It will be. Somebody will do it. But I feel still optimistic in the sense that this, if you yourself use it right, I think can be very helpful. I'll give you some examples how I use it. So I use, I play with them all, Bard, Bing, and ChatGPT 3 right now, the public one, not the 4, which is even more scary. But I think the pace you're seeing here is because this is purely software. There's no hardware. Remember, the computer and the phone had hardware, right? But that's why I'm making the analogy with the web browser. That was software. Within a few weeks of what I saw on Mosaic, Netscape came out. Like literally weeks, right? So it's kind of the same analogy of ChatGPT 3 to 4, right? Like it was much better than Mosaic. Like it did so much more. So I think this is going to be something we just have to kind of deal with it. But my use are summarization, very helpful. I use it for rewriting paragraphs when I'm stuck. So if I'm writing a review and I write a paragraph and I don't like it, and I want to rearrange it, and I'm just there. And you know how sometimes you get that writer's block? You're like, oh, God. So you go for a walk or something usually, right? I still do that because it's healthy to go for a walk, take a break when your brain is not working. But oftentimes I just feed it to ChatGPT because I find that's actually the best one right now for this particular application. And I say rewrite, and I give it like 5 lines, like 3-sentence paragraph, and it does. And it sometimes gives me kind of crap. And so I hit redo and it does it again. And then I get another one. I'm like, oh, this one's fine. And I then act like an editor, right? Like if, I had a young new journalist on the team that had submitted an article for me to review before publishing. And I just tweak it up. And I find that it kind of helps me get over that block when my brain is broken. Going from writing to going back to editing just briefly, right? But not editing my own, but editing my kind of pseudo own, right? Because it's my writing that it's rewriting. So it's still me, but it's not me. And so I've been using this quite a bit in the last few weeks, and it's really made a big difference in my productivity. So there you go.
That's cool. I haven't been using it to write or help me rewrite stuff because I don't know. I feel like I'm a bit old school. I will think about reintegrating that. I've over the last couple of days, I've been hitting a huge writer's block, which doesn't happen very often with me. But I'm doing like the 6-month review of the Pixel 7 and the Pixel Watch, and I've been using these for literally 6 months. So I know so much about them, and picking what I wanted to talk about specifically has been really hard. So maybe I should have used it there. But I actually used it a little bit to suggest some titles for me, because I was like, I need something quirky. I need something. I gave it like what the topic of the article was, and I was like, give me 6 titles. Two of them should be quirky. 2 of them should be SEO oriented. 2 of them should be I don't know, like creative or whatever. And in a couple of instances, it suggested things or angles I hadn't thought about for my headlines. And I was like, I'll take that and I'll make it better. Like I'll adapt it obviously to what I think, but I'll take this idea or this word, this keyword that it threw at me, and I'll adapt it to a title that I see fit. And in these instances, it has been, helpful. I still haven't fully integrated it into my entire workflow. I realize there's a lot of potential there. I just want to hit on something you mentioned about, it being used for like evil and for war. I come from a country that's been at war
forever,
ever since I was born. And I guess part of this, the reason I'm a little bit reticent about this whole technology is that I've seen how things can be used for evil, and I've seen it firsthand throughout my entire life. So, and I know how people can believe literally everything or everything their leader wants them to believe, and how they can be torn apart. And I guess in the US right now, that's pretty similar.
We're having some real problems with, especially things around queer and trans rights right now are being eroded very rapidly. And this is something that affects me directly, so I can relate.
100%. Like I can see the parallels when I open Twitter, and I can really see the parallels with what we've been going through in Lebanon. But I don't want to get into the politics of it, but it's just like you realize that someone doctoring an image or using AI to create an image or create a video or make something that isn't real appear to be real, and with people not being very tech aware, could believe this stuff and then, get dragged into the things, the horrible things you can imagine. That's part of the reason that's keeping me a little bit questioning the impact of this technology, because I don't feel like we have the laws or the limits or anything.
Absolutely.
We're nowhere near that at this point. Not even here in France, where I live right now.
That's totally fair.
And that's one thing. The other thing is basically like mastering it feels like it requires a lot more time and a lot of dedication to tinker with the prompts and learn what it can do. But still, it seems that you can do a lot by just, embracing the basics part of it. And that's what it seems like you're doing, and it sounds really cool.
That's kind of my goal right now. I'm very weary of it. I'm going to keep an eye on it. I'm going to make sure I use it for good. I can't stop what other people are doing with it, obviously, right? And I'm going to call them on it if they do. I'm concerned about the publication industry, but I've been concerned about it for a long time now because it's changed so much in the 20 years or so that I've been writing as a tech journalist and participating in podcasting and making videos and etc. So I am not, I'm not naive, but at the same time, look, right now it's a tool and it's helped me out. And the way I look at it, social media has been coerced and corrupted by, the evil people, if you want to call them that, to their benefit. In our previous 2 elections in this country, as you know, I'm also Canadian, but it's also happening in Canada. It's happening in France. My mom and my family still lives in France. I was actually in France during the presidential election last year, about a year ago, watching the results on television with my mom, who's much older than me. And so, all of this stuff is totally valid. But, you can't stop it, and I'm just going to hope for the best. I'm hoping that as you can't regulate this stuff. I mean, I think you can. I want it to be, but it's moving so quick that if we can't even regulate social media properly, which is already decades old, like, I don't think we can regulate this. Like, so I want to believe that we can, but I don't think we can. Like, I'm not against trying to set up a ethical framework around AI, but I don't think that's going to happen based on my experience with all the technologies in the past, even the web, They tried to regulate the web in the early days, but then we got Amazon, and it was awesome. But now look at Amazon now. Is it really that awesome? Like, I use it still, but like, it's kind of scary, right? So anyway, like, we could have an entire podcast on this. I just wanted to give the audience a taste of some of the things you feel, because this article really hit a nerve with me. It's a great article, folks. It'll be in the show notes. Go check it out. Android Authority, Rita wrote it. It'll be linked there. So check it out. And you know my thoughts now, at least on the surface, really quickly, about what I do, what I think. I'm an eternal optimist, so I'm really keeping my fingers crossed that in the end, it'll all work out. Either that or it'll be Terminator and we'll all be dead. So on this positive thought, let's move on to some other stuff. So I'm actually intrigued by another product that's not a software product that you played with.
Yeah.
It is a MagSafe compatible for phones grip that has, from what I understand, a Bluetooth camera trigger and a battery built in, and it kind of attaches to any MagSafe phone. And in this case, there's a few of them, but mostly iPhones. And then, of course, to any MagSafe case for Android phones. And I'm just kind of blown away by this thing. It's really cool. Number one, you reviewed it, and I want to know more about MagSafe cases for my Pixel, because I have no MagSafe yet whatsoever in my world, because I'm not an iPhone user. And I love it. I think it's a great idea. I think that Android should just adopt it wholeheartedly. I guess they're worried about getting sued by Apple or something. I don't know what the deal is there.
Yeah, so a couple of things. First, Android is sort of gonna have to adopt it whether they want to or not, because Qi 2 will have all the magnets and stuff. And when we were at MWC, we saw the Wireless Consortium booth, and we went there with a regular MagSafe phone and a couple of phones with MagSafe cases, and we tried them on the Qi 2 charger, the certified Qi 2 charger they had, and it works. So basically, Qi 2 is gonna be backwards compatible with MagSafe, even though they don't want to say it's backwards. It's only Apple that can officially say that.
Right.
So that's the thing. So Android devices will get it, but it's going to be probably at the end of this year. Maybe we'll see 1 or 2 phones get Qi 2, and then it's going to be next year probably for a lot more of them. So the thing with MagSafe, to get back to the beginning, I've been a huge fan and super excited about it, and I've written several articles on Android Authority about MagSafe stuff. It's because I come from this world of Nokia phones, 2007, 2008, where we wanted to have accessories with our devices, and we wanted to plug things in and use more things with our phone to make the most out of it. But every single accessory you got, you had to have some way of attaching it to your phone. And sometimes you had to plug it in the headphone jack. Sometimes it was the USB, micro USB, USB-C, whatever port. Sometimes it was a clamp on the phone. Sometimes it was some specific kind of magnet array. Other ports, there were so many different ways of adding either lenses or power banks that attach to the phone, or even flashlights and other stuff. And every single one had some sort of attachment. So suppose I'm going out and I want to use both an external battery and a flashlight. Each one is going to attach in a different way, and potentially they might not be, compatible. I couldn't put both of them on the phone because they have to be used in the same port or whatever. So MagSafe sort of fascinated me when Apple announced it, even though I'm not an iPhone user, because it simplifies this whole thing and it makes it uniform, and it makes it it's just one thing. And every accessory maker, whether they want to or not, they're going to have to adapt this thing. They have to adopt to this thing. They have to adapt to it. They're going to have to change. If they were making an accessory that attaches with a rectangular magnet array, that's gone. Now it's MagSafe, right?
Exactly. We're done.
And yeah, so that opens up a whole world of accessories to you, just because, everyone is now compatible with this one simple way of attaching, and it's magnets, and it's fun. And if you've seen Breaking Bad, there's that famous scene of, yay, I'm gonna say it, maybe, bitch, magnets. So yeah, that's the thing. And it's like snap on, snap off. You don't have to plug, clamp, twist, do anything. It's as simple as that. This is what's exciting to me about the whole ecosystem. And I've been looking for ways, to bring this to my Pixel phones, because I use Pixels most of the time.
Same here.
The first batch of accessories or things that adapted MagSafe to Pixels were basically just like ring magnets that you attach on the back of the phone, and I don't like those because they snag when you put the phone in the pocket. They wobble when you put the phone on the desk. It's just not it's not ideal. And then I saw that Moment, the guys that make the lenses for iPhones and stuff, they make a MagSafe compatible case for the Pixel, and I asked for a review in it, and I was able to get a bunch of accessories with that. So a tripod holder. I mean, how awesome it is that you don't have to screw the tripod. When I'm recording like a quick short or something for our content on Android Authority, I slap my phone on the tripod and it's there. I don't have to think about it. And that's so cool. And so I started looking into more accessories, and the thing that caught my attention was the snap grip, because it reminded me a lot of the camera handle that Nokia had for the Lumia
1020 one.
Yeah,
I remember that one. So good.
Yeah, it was really nice and practical, obviously. I tried to, actually they reached out to us, I think, and I was like, yeah, just let me try it. I take a lot of photos. I have a Pixel. I have a MagSafe case. Let's do this. So I tried it, and it's really cool because it connects over Bluetooth, so you can use the shutter button, and now you have a physical shutter button for your photos. Sadly, no zoom button, and this was my biggest annoyance with it, I think. And it also has an internal battery, so you can wirelessly charge your phone. And again, I have the case on my phone. I just snap it on and I can take photos, so that's cool. When I'm on the go, I have a little bit more battery. It's not going to fully charge my phone, but it gets me through the rest of the day. And the shutter button is very, very handy for that stuff. So that's it. I had to give it to a colleague of mine because he also really likes taking photos and he doesn't get to review a ton of stuff. So I was like, this is yours. I'll figure. Yeah. But yeah, so this is, I was going to show it to the Skype. This is the Moment case for the Pixel.
It looks really nice. It's just like a normal case. I have a Spigen case on my, and it looks very similar actually.
So this is, I don't know if you can see the circle, but there's
I do.
Yeah. And the thing is, I wrote something recently about the fact that this is no longer something that's special to a few case makers, because Spigen right now is making one for the Galaxy S23 Ultra.
All right.
So, and I think Rink, I don't know how you pronounce that in English, but it's Ring and KE at the end. I think they're also making one for the Galaxy S23 Ultra and someone else. And Moose makes one that's also for different phones, including the Pixel. And there's another brand as well. So with the Galaxy S23 Ultra, I noticed a big shift because I could see at least 3 or 4 very well-known case brands getting MagSafe cases for the S23 Ultra specifically. So it's no longer that niche use case.
Yeah.
And it's no longer something that's done by, no-name brands with several letters of the alphabet jammed in and that show up on Amazon.
Right.
It feels more legit at this point because, once Spigen makes it, that you don't have to think about it twice.
Yeah, you have arrived. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So that's the thing. The snap grip can be used as a stand, so you can put the phone and watch videos vertically and horizontally, and it comes with a few other things. So there's a tripod holder and there's a ring light and a few other things, and you can snap all of them on top of each other, which is super cool.
Wow. So they stack. Yeah. Okay, cool. Very nice. And then tell me about the button. Is it a dual detent? Does it do anything like that? Or is it just a dumb click button?
It's one dumb click button. That's the thing.
So the focus
it doesn't focus and then shutter.
Yeah, I get it. Well, that's good. I mean, I want to try it out now. I'm probably see if I can get a review in it as well. Mostly because I kind of miss this Nokia 1020 grip there. Listen, guys, you should read this article by Rita, Android Authority. I'll put it in show notes. I want to chat about some news and rumors and leaks now. There's a bunch of stuff. We can rapid fire through some of it. So the one I'm most excited about, like this is a teaser, but it's really news because it's coming really soon. Xiaomi kind of blew our minds and said, hey, you kind of like the Xiaomi 13 and 13 Pro? I have a Pro right now. And then I also have a 13 Lite, by the way, which I'm reviewing for Geekspin. And I'm actually, you'd think, oh, it's the Lite, whatever. But, oh, wow, it's actually pretty damn good as well. It's not like, 13 Pro good. It doesn't have OIS and stuff, but it still takes really nice photos. And now there's a 13 Ultra. We kind of knew this could happen. It's not the first time we've had Ultras. Last year, we did not get an Ultra that was a global Ultra. But the year before, I think the 11 Ultra was a global model. So it's super exciting. What are they going to do that's better than the 13 Pro? Like, a better telephoto, 2 telephotos? I don't know. I'm super excited. There is a teaser photo on, several of Xiaomi's sites. And you guys, Hadley, of course, who's awesome, wrote about it for you guys. And I'm excited. I'm looking forward to it. The announcement will be on April 18th. So, yeah, stay tuned for that. What are your thoughts, Rita?
I think the most interesting bit is something that leaked a little earlier today because Xiaomi seems to have teased that this will have a variable aperture 1-inch lens, which would fix like one of the biggest problems with 1-inch lenses, which is when you're near an object, the depth of field is really shallow, and you end up with stuff that isn't really in focus. So supposedly it would go from 1.9 to 4, and it's not clear if it's going to be staggered, like you could reach every single f point between these, or if it's just like it can do 1.9 and it can do 4. But regardless of that, you could switch to 4 and then get a larger depth of field, so you'd be able to have a crisper photo if you want a lot of things in focus, or you could go back to 1.9 and have a very, very shallow depth of field and only something in focus. So I think that's the most interesting tidbit we know about the phone, because I think it was Xiaomi itself that teased it this morning.
Yeah. So interesting. Okay. For that as well, huh? Yeah, I'm more looking forward. I'm hoping they can do what Huawei's been doing with the Mate 50 Pro and most recently the P60 Pro, which is a continuously variable aperture. You can set it to whatever you want. That to me is crazy awesome, and I kind of want it to be like, I know I'm like, come on, how Huawei for a long time there was really dominating, and I kind of hope that because like I had a partnership with Huawei before, and they did variable aperture before they kind of left the Huawei partnership. I'm wondering if there's some kind of like crossover here somehow. And so this is kind of what I'm hoping for. Although f1.9 as the lowest aperture, I mean the biggest one, the highest amount of light is I would like to see something a little better than that. I cannot off the top of my head remember what the P60 Pro can do, but I kind of feel it was better than that. So I don't know. Anyway, it's good news, right? Like we're all like, this is a big deal. I'm looking forward to it. And so we'll keep you informed and stay tuned for more news around the Xiaomi 13 Ultra. We'll find out more April 18th. The next bit of news I have that I think is maybe interesting to some of you, mostly because ZTE, depending where you are, Canada, US, UK, the Axon line has been coming to the US, surprisingly. Sold officially in the US. every year. And it's not awesome, but it's there. It exists. And mostly it's the hardware that's really impressive. The price is really good. Specs are really good. Supports our 5G bands. And then the software is always a little, you probably won't get updates, but I've experimented with their phones. A lot of them have under display cameras too, because ZT and Nubia are very similar companies, and Red Magic is part of the Nubia empire, and the Red Magic phones have under display. Under display cameras are not ready yet. Like, they are not ready. So I'm not sure if this has one. I need to look at the specs. But basically, yeah, what I'm saying is we have an Axon 50 Ultra now. And it does look like a minor revision of last year's 40 Ultra, because it doesn't seem like they always had like the high pixel count triple camera system. They're one of the few that almost did the triple 50, but they always had a 64 in there somehow. And it's not spectacular. It's okay. It's not great. It's more like numbers game. But, it's a cool looking phone. It does have some nice features. And, yeah, it's China only for now. So I figure in the summer, which is when we usually get the Axon phones in North America and the rest of the world, the global model, we'll find out more. I'm a little surprised they didn't go with an 8 Gen 2. It's an 8 Plus Gen 1, which is fine. It's a great chip, but it's a little late, isn't it? If it was January, I'd be like, okay, fine. But it's April. I don't know. What are your thoughts looking at the little bit we know here?
I've never used a ZTE phone. The only time so my thoughts are very limited. The only time I had some hands-on time with them was at MWC, and yeah, they looked really cool, but it's not a device I would personally use. But I mean, the more we advance, and look at us complaining about 8 Gen 2 versus 8 Plus Gen 1, and that feels, a bit weird.
I'm not really complaining. I'm just surprised. I'm like, if this is your flagship, why don't you have an 8 Gen 2 in there, That's all.
Yeah, what I was saying is basically that we're at a point where we nitpick about small specs, whereas, when you look at the globality of a phone, it can do so much. We're so advanced right now with these smartphones and what they're capable of. And yeah, ZTE's phones, they looked cool. I swiped, I tried to discover a little bit the interface. Not my cup of tea, but
no.
Cool for them. Cool for them.
If you like it, enjoy your breakfast. I'm not gonna
exactly
argue. I have never been super impressed with their phones, but the price points are generally very good. And there was when they did I think it was the Axon 20 Pro a few years ago, that came with a stock build of Android, like almost EOS, almost like Moto,
Yeah.
And that was cool. But then they went back to doing skinned their Chinese weirdness, and it was just like, oh, you guys lost the plot. But for a little while there, it looked kind of optimistic. But the specs are interesting, and I also like the fact that this has satellite connectivity for China, right? So Beidou is a satellite constellation in China that provides messaging, and of course positioning. They use it as a GPS replacement over there. And yes, it does. This phone supports. This is the first, I think, phone from China that I ever remember reading about that has some sort of messaging for their network, which, because you were not going to get that if they ever make a US model, right? Yeah. But it's worth knowing it exists and it's there. So that's one thing. The next one I want to talk about real quick is, there's a few things here. This is not, I'm literally going to take 2 seconds on this just because I want to, look, we don't get a lot of phones in the US, like the reality, right? You can buy a lot of phones on Amazon. You can get the Xiaomi and the Redmis and the Pocos and the Realmes and stuff if you want. And most of them now work with our networks, which is fine. But Moto is still one of the companies that makes kind of budget, mid-range, low-end phones. They're not priced anywhere near as competitively as the Chinese brands I just mentioned. But they persist, and they're making a phone here. The Moto G Power 5G was announced last week. I kind of missed it. This is how exciting it is. But it's interesting because it's got Dimensity 930 chip, which is not a chip you see very often 5G, of course. 120 hertz upgrade to the display. I think it's a 1080p instead of the 720p on the 4G version of this phone. And again, the pricing is completely ridiculous, but you'll never buy this phone. It's going to be a carrier giveaway when you go to prepaid in the US, basically, right? But I just want to mention this phone exists, and, it's got the awesome Moto software, which is one of the positives, but $300 for this, like, forget it. Just buy anything else, really. For people who are listening to the podcast, who've watched, Rita show her case earlier for the Patreons who watched the video version of the podcast, you folks know that this is not a phone you should buy. You should get it for free for a backup burner phone. You should replace it with a Redmi or a Realme or something if you're on a very tight budget and you really need a $300 phone that kicks ass, right? So what are your thoughts on this? Because you have a different perspective. You guys get Moto phones in Europe too, but I don't ever see them anywhere there. Here you actually see them, right? Because they're Latin America, you see them too, right?
I was invited to one of the Moto Edge launches about a year ago here in Paris. I had just arrived in France, and they were trying to make a push for the French market, and then somehow they disappeared a few months later. Didn't feel like their push was very sustainable, or that there was a lot of enthusiasm behind their push. Yeah, we don't see them a lot, but I mean, it's also very difficult to gauge what people are using because everyone has a case on, and phones these days.
Right, they're starting to look the same, I know.
Most of them.
Even
unless it's
us,
an iPhone. Yeah.
the experts, we have our time to tell them apart.
Exactly. You can tell the iPhone apart. You can tell some of the Samsungs apart. The Samsungs, I think they're a lot easier to tell apart. But like the other devices, it's very difficult. You can see a phone and you can imagine this is like a $100, $200 cheap phone, and it's battered and it's been abused, because someone is still watching videos on it because it's their only device. And I imagine this is where something like the Moto G Power would fit, because it has a decent battery life, and it will probably be also cheap here if you buy it on some sort of easy contract or whatever, and you try to split the price over a few months or so. That's gonna be like where this phone lands, and I mean, I guess why not? You can still find better options for the price, and eventually, like if you wait for something like the Pixel 6a to drop to 300, like you're getting totally different
significantly better experience.
Yeah. So choice is good. My only issue with Motorola, I went to their website recently because we were talking about, budget phones in the US on the team on AA. And I went to their website and I saw, I don't know, like 10 different
it's insane.
Moto G models. And I still remember when it was like Moto E, Moto G, and Moto X. And it was as simple as that. And you would be like, okay, I have this budget, I will get this phone. End of story. Now with the same budget, you have so much choice, and it doesn't feel like it makes sense.
It makes zero sense. We've talked to Motorola about this. We've told them we but they're saying, first of all, like they've rolled the E series into the G, right? So the Play, like they've added these monikers, right? Like, so G was the G, right? Then they did the G Power, which is bigger battery version of the same phone. It was a good idea because back then battery life wasn't what it is today. They made phones with up to 6,000 milliamp hours back in the day. Can you imagine that? That was amazing. And then they did the Plus, which are kind of like the better versions, and then they did the Play, which were like the cheaper version. And the Play is basically erased the E series. Like the E went away and the Play replaced the E. So then it kind of made sense. You had the Moto G Play, the Power for more battery, the Plus for the better version. But then they added 5G versions of that. And then they added the stylus version. They called the Moto G stylus, which had a stylus, like not an active stylus, but a capacitive stylus. Nothing really fancy. The point is that you're right. They've totally diluted it. And the prices are just at least typically $100 to $50 too high, compared to, even if you adjust for like this market, right? But in South America, they sell the same phones rebranded slightly differently, like G30, G20, like they have these names. and they're much cheaper. I think it's just this weird thing. They think that because it's North America and the carriers are going to sell these phones for them on the prepaid market, that they can charge. So nobody ever buys them. Like, you would never buy these phones unlocked, even though they exist. Like it's.
Yeah.
I don't get it. And then the Edge, we talked about this last week because they announced the Moto, Edge 40 Pro in the rest of the world, in your part of the world, and we're getting the Edge here, but it's like a diluted, like it's like a crapified version of the Edge you get the rest of the world. Like Verizon is the main partner for Moto phones here on the non-prepaid. And so they take the phones that are like, no, you change this, you remove wireless charging, give it a plastic chassis, remove OIS. Oh, we don't want an OLED, we want an LCD. Oh yeah, you can keep the 144 hertz because the numbers look nice. So we get this totally like destroyed version of the Moto Edge phones. It was a little better last year. I have to give them credit. They didn't destroy it as much. But compared to what you guys are getting, metal and glass, wireless charging, even though Moto's cameras are always a disaster, you still get the specs, at least on paper, of a good camera system. Nothing like that for us. Nothing. And then you look, 3 months after the phone is out, the Edge phones here, they're in the like discount bin at your local Verizon store. You walk in, it's like, get 5 for free. Like, we'll sell you 1 for half price and the other 4 are free. And you're like, how is this business model sustainable, Moto?
No idea. Plus, I can imagine when you're making another version of a phone that already exists, you're still wasting resources. You're still like trying also to develop software and make sure the hardware works in this new version, because eventually it's a new phone. You're wasting tons of R&D and resources and development trying to make a new phone work, whereas you could stick with a few models that work, that do their thing, and then that's the end of the story, right?
Yeah.
And we see this not to this extent with a lot of Xiaomi, Realme, Redmi.
Oh, yeah. Like, they're all the same.
All the rebrands, all the things, all the 20 different models. Even
slightly different chips, slightly different camera sensor, same chassis,
We're dissing Moto here, but I was also looking at the Samsung phones here in France, and I realized that they have the Galaxy, I think, M at this point. That's the low-end thing. So they have Galaxy M phones that start around 120, 130 euros. But they also have Galaxy A phones that start around 120, 130 euros.
Yeah, so they do the same.
And you're like, why? Why even bother having an M and an A series if you're not going to at least, make the M the real budget phone and then make the A the slightly higher up upgrade? And then push it into, the 300, 400, 500 euros. And then at that point, the Galaxy S takes the charge. So all of these decisions, they feel like, you're diluting brand, you're wasting resources, you're also like, how do you keep up with all of these updates? This is why some companies end up not being on top of their updates and on top of their software experience, because they're not providing anything special. And that's the thing. Some resources could be spent on improving the software experience, on providing some special services. This is, for example, like what Google does. Google differentiates with its software experience. It makes something completely different. And so
I have to give Moto credit for the software experience is really very good. But when the hardware is so slow on these G phones, the low end, like the Play series, you're like, it's still a crap experience because the software is really good, but the software is struggling to run on this like Dimensity or like, I don't want to be mean to MediaTek because they make some good chips. I think they just don't tune the phones properly, because I've used some Helio phones from other companies like Techno and an Infinix that ran really well. So I know it's a software optimization problem more than anything else. And they dilute everything. The power used to be, okay, more battery life. We get the idea, right? You get the same phone, more battery life. No, now not anymore. There's like just another tier that doesn't mean anything. The battery life is pretty much the same on all of them. Anyway, I want to move on to other things.
Yeah.
It's a good segue because Moto is rumored to make a new Razr soon where it has a large cover display in the front, much larger than what we're used to. And now we're hearing strong rumors that the Galaxy Z Flip 5 is also going to have a massive cover display on front of it. I just put that in here because Yes, of course. Like, I'm not surprised. This is the next logical step for flip phones. I love the flip form factor myself, big fan. And I want to see a bigger cover display just so that I can do a little more than, I want to be able to type a little quick response with one hand and this tiny little puck in my hand, So yeah, this is a rumor that's coming through. It's obvious, right?
Yeah. It's, as you said, it's what makes the most sense. And we've seen the Vivo, what was it? Wait, the Oppo Flip
That's right.
N2, so many different names. We've seen it with a bigger display, and you look at it, you're like, yes,
it's nice.
That's it.
Yeah.
And the Z Flip 5 is rumored to have a display that's even larger than that. It's probably going to take
3.8, I've heard.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's bigger than some Nokia phones we used to use back in the day.
Yeah, well, think about the G1, that first Android phone, that's 3.2 inches.
Yeah. So, I imagine Samsung will bring a lot more features to this front display. I don't know if they're going to make it, full Android, like you're going to be able to do everything from it. But it's so cool because these foldables, obviously, like, it's cool to open them up and use the entire unfolded display. But most of the time, you just want to reach in and do something really quick, because once you unfold that display, you're getting sucked in.
You're committed.
And
yeah.
You're committed. And it's not something like, if you're walking down the street and you get a message, you want to say yes, no, or just like read the title, make sure it's something urgent that you have to stop for or not. You're not going to be able to unfold the Flip with one hand. It's almost impossible. I don't know if anyone is capable of doing that.
Michael Fisher is the only person in the entire universe who I know who's able to, in one hand, like, I am so scared I'm going to drop the phone doing that. I would never do it.
So I see people with two hands. It's a two-hand affair. It's not something that you're going to be able to do all the time. So the more you can use that outer display and the more benefits you get out of the outer display, the more the entire form factor makes sense as a whole. Because now you're like, okay, I have a tiny phone when I need to, and I can still use it as much, or, I can do, I don't know, maybe 40% of what I usually do on my phone, and I can do it on this outer display. And then, for the time when I need to, I will unfold and I will use the entire phone as it's supposed to. We recently wrote something on Android Authority about an app called Cover Screen OS.
Yes, I heard about it.
I don't know if you tried it.
Not yet.
Apparently, it brings a whole other experience to this tiny, tiny display on the Z Flip and the slightly larger one on the Oppo N2. So imagine that on the Z Flip 5 and, everything that it can bring, because you can read your entire emails and you can do so much more. So even if Samsung limits what you can do on this outer display, you're going to be able to get a third-party app to, benefit from it more. So that's cool.
Yeah. No, I'm for it. I'm actually really excited to see how this evolves, right? Because I think it's logical next step. And whether we're going to get full-blown Android on the cover display natively offered by someone or not, right? I doubt Samsung's going to do it. I also doubt Moto's going to do it. But this is my segue to the next piece. Vivo has finally, we're seeing leaks, right, of an X Flip and an X Fold 2. Now, I mentioned the X Fold 2 last week on the show. We were starting to see rumors of it coming. And so now we're seeing some renders or photos, press photos maybe, leaked of the X Fold 2 and the X Flip. And this is basically, to me, I hate to say this because it's probably not quite that way, but it's the BBK group recycling the Oppo Flip and, of course, the previous generation Vivo X Fold into a newer model, which I'm sure is much improved, has a better hinge, has, clearly this has a pretty big cover display there, not huge, but about the same size as the Flip, just in landscape instead of portrait, and the Flip from Oppo. Yeah, I think, look, this is inevitable, We'll see what happens. There are a bunch of specs here that are leaked. 8 Plus Gen 1. Does that sound familiar to anyone? Dimensity on the Oppo. So, that's the thing. That's what BBK Group does. They make one thing and then they tweak it a little bit. And look, Vivo is still pretty much kind of doing their own thing. So I want to give them credit for that. Like, it's not like the Oppo OnePlus debacle, right? But, but it's inevitable and too exciting because I want more choices. And Vivo, well, at least for now, is still sold in Europe, at least maybe in France, but Germany looking pretty scary right now with all the problems that BBK Group like Oppo had that to drop out as well because of some kind of IP thing. I don't know exactly. I haven't been paying attention, but anyway, thoughts?
As you said, we still don't have tons of foldables in Western markets, and seeing more options, that's going to democratize the entire form factor, I think. And we saw the Phantom phones at, I think it was around $1,000. That was interesting.
Yeah, the Techno. Yeah.
The Techno Phantom something. And these as well. I know that Vivo's software, I had no experience with Vivo phones, but again, at MWC, one of my AA colleagues had a Vivo device and I was using it. And the software experience feels a lot closer, I would say, to AOS AP versus Oppo. And so using it felt more familiar to me. And if I were to recommend, for example, and if we get these devices and we review them and we realize they're good devices, and someone asks me, what should I get? Might lean more towards Vivo than an Oppo phone when I'm doing my recommendation. So, yeah, looks exciting. Again, a few more choices, why not? A few more brands coming to market, lighting a little bit some fire beneath Samsung, because
100%.
They've been running free for the last 4 years. Obviously, you guys get Motorola foldables. I don't think I've seen them here in
they're
France.
like, nobody even knows they exist. Frankly, they've completely lost the plot on the folding phones here.
So Samsung has been, running wild in the entire dominating by just like absence of competitors.
Yeah,
not because they're so good. And it felt like at one point they kind of rested on their laurels with the 3 to 4 transition. Even though it kind of makes sense because the 3 to 4 device, like the Flip 4 and the Fold 4, I think you could imagine that they were beginning to be developed in 2020 when COVID was there, and probably like a lot of things had to be delayed, which means that we got minor upgrades around the clock. But still, it still felt that, they didn't put so much effort into them. They were big reiteration. Whereas the 5 series now with Samsung feels a bit more interesting, and we could see them do more and experiment more and try more things, just because now there are competitors on the market. And if you want to buy a foldable, you can pick a different brand, and that's cool.
Yeah. I like competition. So speaking of cover displays, here's an interesting one. Apple AirPods with a display. Okay, let me rephrase that. Apple AirPods case with a touchscreen on the case. So like a cover display on your wireless earbuds case. This is not happening. This is just a patent. Don't freak out. Like the whole world has gone crazy this week about this. And it's like people believe it's going to happen. I am 50-50 on whether Apple will do this. The lot of patents they have that they haven't done anything about. But I'm intrigued because here's my thing. There's 3 ways this could go, right? Well, hear me out. Way number 1, this is literally just a Bluetooth remote, right? It shows you the title, you hit next, you hit previous, you can remote control your phone's media playback, and it's just that. It's AVCRP, the remote control protocol for Bluetooth. And it has a tiny little OLED screen that's very battery efficient, and it uses some of the battery from the case. But it's nice because maybe your phone is deep in your handbag or something, and then you can have the case in your pocket, and it's much smaller, right? And you can still, without using the weird double tap and triple tap and this is a squeeze. I don't know. It's because I change earbuds every day that I kind of never remember even though I try to change them all to be the same if the software lets me do it. But anyway, I can see that one option. The second option is this is like an Apple Watch. It lets you store some audio locally, right? Or stream audio from your phone to the case, to the earbuds, some weird way like that. Not sure if that's a thing. And of course, then you can leave your phone at home to some extent to just get your music on the device. Now, on Apple Watch, I think you can store some music, but I think to get the streaming, you need cellular connectivity. So I don't see this thing having cellular connectivity. Sorry, guys. And then the third thing is just a dumb iPod, basically in a case, right? Like it used to be, like the iPod Nano, right? And I think again that's very unlikely. I really do feel that this would be more of a scenario one, a remote. But what are your thoughts, if it ever even comes out?
Yeah, I think a lot of people were surprised by this design, but I don't know if you remember around IFA. Last year, we saw a pair of JBL Tour thing.
That's right.
With a display on the case. So it wasn't like, I wasn't as surprised when I saw this. I guess I was surprised because it's an Apple patent. Not as much by the idea, because I'd already seen it. Not in person, but I mean, I'd seen photos of the JBL stuff. So again, I'm leaning the same as you. I think it's going to be a remote. I wonder if they do something more with it, where, for example, like you can switch the app you're listening from, or you can...
Or notifications, because it's Bluetooth, right?
Yeah. Or see like your queue and pick a different song, or, suppose like you have a few icons, something like akin to the Apple Watch a little bit. So you could go like, I want to listen to Pocket Casts or Spotify or Apple Music or whatever. And then pick a playlist and start listening from there. Or if it's just going to be, as you said, just a very, very dumb remote to start with. Again, it's a patent. We don't know what Apple is thinking about these days. They've been trying to do the smart headset glasses thingy for I don't know how long. So I don't know if this is going to come to fruition. It's still it's an interesting proposition. I hope if it's something that's fully fledged and very capable, I hope it's an option and they still keep the basic one, because, earbuds, they cost relatively a lot. Like the good ones, they're about 150, 200. And eventually after 1 or 2 years, they start breaking because you're wearing them all the time. And
or you lose one, or the battery's life starts to get bad. Yeah,
and they're not the most ecologically green things.
Oh, no, they're terrible.
Ever, right? So... I would hope that at least, they keep the basic option for people who don't want to pay something more for a display. And I would hope that it doesn't affect the battery life just as much. So maybe you can turn it on. I mean, it looks like potentially it could have a button or something on the side to turn the display on or off. I don't know.
I mean, I think I trust Apple that this would run on a super efficient ARM chip with an OLED display and be super cheap to add, like maybe another $50 and just, or less than that. And like, I think this is, what you're suggesting with playlists and stuff, exactly what I had in mind when I said remote. I didn't mean dumb remote, like to the extent of like what your car remote, if you do Bluetooth in your car instead of CarPlay or whatever, it's you generally have even the option of picking a song from a playlist. So I think that's kind of what I meant. Like it's kind of like a nice interface around a dumb remote, But yeah, look, I think this is interesting. Don't hold your breath though. And this is actually a good segue to something I really want to briefly touch on, because you're talking about $150 earbuds. I'm a big fan of the sub $100 headphones and earbuds, especially earbuds, because believe it or not, there are some really good ones at this price point. And they are, to check all the boxes. And a lot of people don't realize that. Like, yes, of course, the Galaxy Buds and the AirPods and the Pixel Buds and all these are really nice, but you don't need that. Here's what you need. You need the OnePlus Nord Buds 2. And I'm only saying this because I finally took them out of their box. I mentioned them last week because they were announced. And I've had them for a while. I haven't had time to play with them. I'm going to link to Ben's review on XDA Developers. Benson, kind of because I agree with his general take. These just deliver so much more than the price implies. $60 and it gives you actually relatively decent active noise canceling. And the biggest exciting news for me on these is the sound quality. Now, I'm a pretty picky sound person. I used to do sound in video games. My background's very much professional audio, so I don't like the bass heavy sound. Now, these, like all modern earbuds and headphones, come by default bass heavier because that's what younger and most people are used to nowadays. But the hallelujah moment is the Hey Melody app. That is a third-party app from OnePlus for managing their earbuds. But also, if you have a OnePlus phone, the built-in connectivity for the buds lets you EQ them, like an actual EQ.
Cool.
And I will publish on Twitter my EQ curve that's professionally tuned for those of you who, like me, like a very neutral, flat frequency response. But the good news is you can tune the OnePlus Nord Buds 2 to sound absolutely impeccable. And I mean, yeah, they're not as good as the highest end, but they're so close that you're going to ask yourself, why should I even spend twice as much? Never mind 3 times as much. And so what I want to say is, if you're worried about losing your earbuds, if you're worried about the cost, look at these. Look at the Realme Buds 2, which are another one of my favorites. Not the Buds 3, they're not that good. The Buds 2 specifically, $40 on Amazon in the US. Just $40 on Amazon in the US. They have ANC and they sound fantastic out of the box. They don't have actually an EQ, the Realme Buds, but they have a fantastic sounding profile out of the box. So it's possible, folks, for you to get good buds for cheap. And yes, the drawback of the Nord Buds is that, at least the Nord Buds 2, they're a little bulky. Like they look a little meh and a little bigger than they should, whereas the Realmes are a little sleeker. But the battery life is also like 5 hours with ANC. It's not great, but you know what? It's good enough. And for $60, like the only thing you're missing is wireless charging compared to like a high-end $200 pair of earbuds. The sound is that good. I'm blown away by these. Super amazing.
That's cool to hear. Having cheaper options are always interesting, especially with earbuds. We published, I keep bringing up AA, but we published an article from Lilycats, who reviews a lot of audio stuff, and she works on Sound Guys, and now she's also working for AA. So she was sharing the sound curves of a lot of true wireless earbuds below the $50 price range, and she was like, they sound nearly as good as $200 and $300 earbuds, but what else do you get when you pay for that price? And eventually, like, she mentioned a little bit better build quality, some water resistance, maybe wireless charging, maybe a little bit more efficient ANC, but all of these, they always come as little extras on top of the core experience, which is, good sound, good listening experience, and that's it. For me, earbuds are very personal because I have some, like, I think weird shaped ears or something. I cannot use most of the earbuds that you find on the market.
That is real. Like, it's very much a fitment issue. And it's also the way they sound changes based on how they fit in your ear. So a lot of people, I'll tell them, listen to these, they sound great. And they're like, I don't like them. And I know that we kind of agree on the sound quality, but it's because their ears are shaped differently. And so it's very critical you pick the right silicone tips. And sometimes that even doesn't help.
Yeah. I've tried, I think, like, some of the best ones I tried were Sennheiser earbuds, and the sound was phenomenal. I just couldn't keep them in my ear more than 15, 20, 30 minutes tops. The pressure building, lots of pain in this area of the ear called the targus. It's like it was building so much pressure. And I was like, if I cannot even wear these earbuds for more than half an hour,
there's no point.
The biggest spec sheet, the most important features, they matter diddly squat because I cannot use them. And I have to look for something that's comfortable. And the Google Pixel Buds Pro ended up being good for me, which surprising. Surprising because I wasn't expecting that form factor to fit my ear well. And the Nothing Ear 1 and Ear 2 for a reason I cannot comprehend.
I love the Nothing Ear 1s and 2s as well.
they are extremely comfortable.
Yeah.
And whenever I see an image of a pair of earbuds, I try to liken its shape to the Nothing earbuds. And I'm like, would it be good or not? Do I take a chance and buy it or not? And eventually I'm like, these work, whatever, I'll stick with these. So for now, these are my choices. I would love to be able to test more. And there was a point where I was testing more, but basically I was making my husband wear them for a long period of time. And I was like, are they comfortable for 2 hours? He says, yeah. I'm like, okay, I'll put that they're comfortable, but not for me.
Totally right. These, the only feature I'm really missing on these is automatically turning, pausing the music when you take them out. They don't have that feature, and I'm used to it. And of course, no wireless charging. But honestly, other than that, and the site bulk and battery life limitations, this for the price, you really can't beat these. But I agree with you. Fitment is super critical. For example, I love the Sony earbuds, all of them, like especially the higher end ones. But they're too big and bulky, and they are tiring for me to wear after a while. I like the Link Bud S series, the mid-range ones, more because they're smaller and lighter. But with these, the surprise I had with these Nord Buds too, I always start with the middle size silicone tips, because usually that works for me. And with these, they were uncomfortable. And I realized, they're too small. These particular, so I put the bigger size that came in the box in them, and it immediately they were more comfortable, and it didn't change the sound quality whatsoever. So it's critical. I know you might think, this old pair of earbuds I had, I used the middle tips and it worked great, so I'm going to use the middle tips on this completely different brand. No. And even if they look the same size, no. Just try all the tips, or at least if you, like me, have big ear canals, try the bigger tips. But yeah, I mean, like, I'm amazed. Like, if you went to visit me in 1993 when I saw Mosaic running on that Silicon Graphics computer and you showed me these Nord Buds 2 and said, this is what you're going to use in 30 years. And they are going to sound better than anything you have today, I would have laughed at you hysterically. But the reality, guys, is we are living in a world today. If you're an audio person, it's mind-blowing the number of choices you have and the quality of the products we have. Like, we are spoiled, guys. Like, you have no idea. Like, back then, finding a good pair of headphones or earbuds was a nightmare. There was so much more crap than today.
Yeah,
so
100% true.
We should kind of wrap up. I just want to mention something quickly, really, that was surprising to me. I went to a Verizon thing yesterday. Verizon invited me here in San Francisco to go see their research lab or whatever. And they showed me that they make available to, like, business customers a private 5G network solution. So basically, if you have like a need for your own private 5G network that, is super secure, more reliable than Wi-Fi because it's managed for you, and it's, lower latency because it's 5G. And of course, they can customize it to use whatever band you want, right? Like low band, mid band, or millimeter wave. And it can be in your factory, in your warehouse, or in your office. Give you an example. The National Football League. I'm not a sports ball person, but there is such a thing called the NFL out there. Apparently, those of you who are listening, correct me if I'm wrong. That apparently there's like, it's not a ball because it's not round. It's like this oval shaped thing. They throw it at each other and they look all tough. That thing, their headsets that they're wearing, the coaches, are running VoIP, low latency, ultra high audio quality on a private 5G network in the stadium. I thought it was two-way radio, but no, this is one of their customers, the NFL. But anyway, I want you to imagine that we are at a state now where you can go to Verizon, and it's not a pitch for Verizon. I'm just saying, like, I'm sure that the other ones do the same thing, but you can go to them and say, I am a business who needs a solution that's better than Wi-Fi, and they will give you that using 5G. Kind of blew my mind.
Yeah.
So, any thoughts on that?
It's really cool. I listened to another podcast called The Internet of Things with Stacey Higginbotham.
Oh yeah,
and
Stacey,
Kevin
she's awesome.
Toffel. Yeah, and they talk a lot about this kind of enterprise networks for IoT stuff, and this reminds me a lot of the stuff that I hear them talk about, like LoRa networks, and it's really interesting because you don't want to use public networks for a lot of secure stuff. I come from medical background, and I can imagine like using public networks in a hospital or using a public network. Yeah, that's not the smartest thing. When I was doing my my internship at a hospital in Lebanon, all of the computers were not connected to the internet. If you wanted to, connect to the internet, you had to go to the library with your own laptop, and then you would be able to connect, because everything else was on a separate network.
Makes sense.
Even my bank at the time, their computers were not online. They had a separate thing, like in every 3 or 4 workers would have one computer that was connected, and all the rest of their computers were on a separate network. So there are so many settings where having a private network that cannot be breached from the outside and that remains private, secure, and where people can have fast communication, because you need that obviously in like banking sector, also probably in like factories, in lots of businesses.
Yeah, for sure.
So yeah, that seems like, I mean, it makes sense. And having 5G come into a play there, instead of relying on other kinds of technologies that cannot carry this high of a bandwidth. That's super cool. That's super cool.
Yeah, and I'm going to show you quickly for those on Patreon watching the video version. This is what the box looks like. This is actually a military version of the box, because the military also uses private 5G networks. You see it there? So it's not very big. It's like the size of a little briefcase with 2 antennas sticking out. That's just a base station, for example. So like you just put that in your warehouse and off you go. Listen, we should wrap up. I want you to tell the folks out there where they can find you on the internet, your social media handles, your stuff on Android Authority. Tell us everything, Rita.
So I write on Android Authority. I'm a senior features editor on the site, and you can see some of my writing, and also a lot of the content that we publish on the features section is managed, co-managed by me and by Rob on the team. So a lot of the ideas usually come from me and from the writers, but we're like putting our own personal touch on top of it to make sure that the content is really high quality. And I'm on Twitter at KouryRT, which is KHOURYRT. On Instagram, same thing, but I rarely post there. So that's where I am, mostly Twitter and Android Authority.
Awesome. So folks, please follow Rita on Twitter. Ask her questions if you want, but not too many questions. And of course, read her work at Android Authority. And you know how you can talk to me on Twitter and Instagram. It's at Tankgirl. That's TNKGRL. Like the comic book character, just drop all the vowels. That's my handle. Hit me and Rita up on Twitter if you want to talk about the podcast. And of course, check out my pretty pictures of phones, cars, food, travel, and all the other stuff taken with phones, all on Instagram. Again, at TNKGRL. The podcast lives at mobiletechpodcast.com. We're on Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Pocket Casts, Spotify, everywhere good podcasts can be found. And so please subscribe, tell your friends. And, if your app lets you rate or review the show, please consider doing that. It would be awesome. Also, a couple of YouTube channels you should subscribe to and check out. YouTube.com/mobiletechpodcast is where I have unboxings and kind of phone relevant material like earbuds, wearables, that kind of stuff. And then Mobile Tech More, which is youtube.com/mobiletechmore for the rest of it, like home stuff, car stuff, travel stuff, accessories, gadgets. Again, you know how YouTube works. So, like, subscribe, tell your friends, click the bell, comment, all the good stuff. Everybody knows how YouTube works. So please check it out. If you want to help me with this podcast, consider Patreon, patreon.com/tankgirl. That's patreon.com/TNKGRL. There is a video version of the podcast you can get ahead of the audio version. And, you kind of get a perk and you can see stuff and see us and, devices and photos and things. It's kind of fun. So, for a small amount every month, you can get that video version. That's one of the big perks. So check it out. And of course, there's other things like joining our Discord. And then, of course, you can consider like other tiers that are available there. So check it out, patreon.com/TNKJRL. And if you don't want to use Patreon for whatever reason, there is a link in the show notes you can click through, gives you to a PayPal button. You can give me like a $5 donation for my coffee addiction. I grabbed a can today because it's early here. I woke up and rolled out of bed to do a podcast. Didn't even go to the coffee shop. That's next. So folks, help me out if you can. And I want to thank our sponsor, Mint Mobile. So as you know, I'm constantly reviewing multiple phones. And while that's fun, it also means I'm constantly spending a lot of money for wireless service on multiple SIMs. That's where Mint Mobile comes in, and that's who I'm partnering with for today's podcast. If you also want to save money on your wireless service, switch to Mint Mobile. As tech-savvy early adopters, you've probably heard of Mint Mobile before, but let me quickly tell you how awesome their service is. Mint Mobile offers premium wireless for as low as $15 a month, and you don't have to sacrifice any coverage, speed, or data. They're built on the nation's largest 5G network. They keep costs low because they sell direct to you online. They cut out the retail stores and salespeople. Why should you pay more than you have to for access to the same network? In my experience testing phones, Mint Mobile delivers the same data speeds and call quality as the big three for a fraction of the cost. Switching to Mint is super easy. Thanks to their eSIMs, you can sign up and activate immediately right on your phone from the comfort of your home. No more standing around and waiting in line at a big wireless store. You can keep your current device and phone number and easily switch services. And if your phone isn't eSIM compatible, Mint will ship you a new SIM free of charge. All Mint Mobile plans include unlimited nationwide talk and text, lightning fast 5G, and free mobile hotspot. Mint will show you how much data you use each month and recommend plans that save you money. Mint also offers a modern family plan that lets you set up a super affordable family plan with as little as 2 lines. Use my link mintmobile.com/mobiletech to get premium wireless starting for $15 a month. That's mintmobile.com/mobiletech. Stop paying more than you need on your wireless bill and start saving big with Mint Mobile. And I want to thank you, of course, Rita, for being my guest on the show finally. Thanks for being on this week.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. We'll get you on the show again sometime in the future. And folks, we'll have another show next week. So stay tuned for that. Until then, cheers, everybody.
This has been the Mobile Tech Podcast with Tank Girl, proudly presented by worldpodcasts.com. You can visit us online at mobiletechpodcast.com.